morning, everybody. Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. And oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you were so near to me. You have been so, so kind. The overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, no mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, no lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, no mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, no lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, no lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. ran away. Your love never fails. I know I still make mistakes, but you have new mercies for me every day. Your love never fails. You stay the same through the ages. Your love never changes. There may be pain in the night, but joy comes in the morning. And when the oceans rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fails. Your love never fails. The wind is strong and the water's deep, but I'm not alone here in these open seas, 'cause your love never fails. The chasm is far too wide. Oh, I never thought I'd reach the other side, but your love never fails. You stay the same through ages. Your love never changes. There may be pain in the night, but joy comes in the morning. And when the oceans rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fails. Yeah, your love never fails. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You stay the same through the ages. Your love never changes. There may be pain in the night, but joy comes in the morning. And when the oceans rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fails. Yeah, your love never fails. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good.
I'm going to lead us in some guided prayer before Sergio leads us in a couple more songs. And so we're going to practice a little bit of what we practiced last week, if you were with us, a prayer of kindness to self. and that we experience the Holy Spirit by being kind to ourselves. That's where we find God. So if you want to close your eyes, that can help you engage. Helps me engage because we're going to kind of use our mind's eye to help us in this experience. So I'm going to close my eyes. And what I encourage you to do is imagine yourself behind a waterfall. And as we said last week, the waterfall is all of the thoughts and feelings and impressions and stresses and everything that is your life as you experience it. And some of it is joy, plenty of it is stressful and anxious inducing. And so we're just going to imagine there's that waterfall. And most of the time, what we are living our life, we're under that waterfall. They're just cascading down on us, all of those things. But what we're imagining right now is ourselves getting in an alcove behind that waterfall. And we're sitting there peacefully, and Jesus is beside us, and we're just observing the waterfall. We are not the one who is being drenched by everything coming down. We are observing it. We're trying to know and understand. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do as we're quiet now for a minute is to just observe and note all of those things that are coming down. And you're not going to judge yourself for any of the things that are coming down. If you notice that as we're quiet, you spend 90% of the time that we're quiet actually like planning the rest of your day or thinking about some stress from work or talking with your children because they interrupted you, that's not a bad thing. The way we're going to judge this experience of prayer is not how focused we were. It's not even how peaceful we felt. The way that we're going to judge this is how kind to ourselves are we as we do this. So as you close your eyes and you imagine that waterfall coming down, I just want you to note what you see and gently explain it to yourself. Yes, of course I'm thinking about that thing from work because it is not resolved yet. Yes, of course I am thinking about Tuesday because I have to call that person and I'm really not looking forward to calling that person on Tuesday. Of course I am thinking about so-and-so in my life because they're sick. And every little thing we're going to use is an opportunity to be kind to ourselves. That is where we will meet God. That is where we'll meet Jesus, who's right next to us doing the same. So let's be quiet together and observe the waterfall. And we're going to continue to stay quiet together for just a bit longer, but I'm just going to interrupt to say if there is any self-talk going on in any of us who are participating right now, where we are judging ourselves, where we're feeling, I'm too distracted, I didn't do it right. We just gently return now to self-kindness. We gently return to you, Jesus, who's beside us, looking at the waterfall. You see everything we're doing and you think, of course they're doing that. Of course. You are not judgmental in the least. And we ask that you would impart that non-judgmentalism onto us, that we can look at ourselves with the same non-judgmental eyes. Let's be quiet a bit longer. And Jesus, as song continues to take us into prayer here, I pray that this, any amount of kindness toward ourselves that we were able to access in this space would stay with us, and that we would feel your Holy Spirit in the midst of that, that we would know that is where you live, God. You live in that place of non-judgmentalism toward ourselves, and that is the only way that we can birth non-judgmentalism toward others and toward our world, is when it starts with ourselves. So may we find you there as we continue in song.
Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good. Yes, you are good, good. Oh, yes, you are good, good. Oh, yes, you are good, good. Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, yes, you are good, good. Oh, yes, you are good. You're never gonna let me down. Yeah, 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 you're never gonna let me down. When the night is holding on to me, God is holding on. When the night is holding on to me, God is holding on. ever seen the wonder in the glimmer of first sight, as the eyes begin to open, the blindness meets the light? If you have so say, I see the world in light, I see the world in wonder, I see the world in life, person and live in color, and I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. Have you ever seen the wonder in the air of second life? I haven't come out of the waters with the old one left behind. If you have so said, I see the world in light, I see the world in wonder, I see the world in light, first in living color, and I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. I see the world in grace, I see the world in gospel, and I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. Yeah, I'm walking in the wonder. You're the wonder in the wild, turning wilderness to wonder. You have so say, I see the world in love, I see the world in freedom, I see the Jesus way. You're the wonder in the wild. I see the world your way, and I'm not afraid to follow. And I see the world your way, and I'm not ashamed to say so. I see the Jesus way, and I'm walking in the light. And I see the world your way, and I'm not afraid to follow. And I see the world your way, and I'm not ashamed to say so. I see the Jesus way, and I'm walking in that light. I see the world in grace, and I see the world in gospel, and I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. Yeah, I'm walking in the wonder. You're the wonder in the wild, turning wilderness to wonder. If you have so said, I see the world in love, I see the world in freedom, I see the Jesus way. You're the wonder in the wild.
Hi, everyone. I have a prayer that Kezia Brackett wrote, and I am going to pray and share with everyone this morning. Jesus, we invite your presence with us today. Would you speak to us and through us? Open our hearts and minds to you and to each other. May we hear what we need to hear, learn what we need to learn, and may we become ever more compassionate and open to the wideness of the world and the ways you move in it. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Kezia, for writing this prayer. That Kezia, she's the best, I have to say. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Vince. I am husband of Kezia. That is my greatest accolade, but I'm also one of the pastors here. And we hope that the music and the prayer has helped you feel pulled out of yourself and connected with God this morning. We started this church in particular for people who feel more comfortable in progressive or secular settings rather than religious settings. And we'll especially dig into that reality today. I'm very excited to do so for our topic. But we want you to know, as a result of this, whatever religious or non-religious background you have, you come from, is your starting point today, as you Zoom in or Facebook Live in with us today, you are so welcome. And we think that you'll feel spoken to here, and we think that you'll feel helped here. We hope that you do. We, like most people, are trying to just discover deep and full life that is beyond self-centeredness, that is beyond the status quo, that is resilient in struggle. And our guide here is Jesus. There are plenty of religious settings that present faith in Jesus as an exclusive thing, as a boundary drawing thing, as something that some people are in and some people are out of, as a thing that's in opposition to other approaches to life. And that's just never been our experience. Our experience of following Jesus and of spiritual growth that's grounded in the Bible has always made us more inclusive. It's always made us more humble and compassionate, more sensitive to the suffering of others, and not more closed off. So that is what we're about here. My challenge to those of us who are already part of if you're somebody who's a part of our community, my challenge to you this morning is this: who in our community can you show this week you want them here? Who can you show that you want them here? Somebody else in our community. Who comes to mind? Who can you show that they are valuable, that they are important, and you are glad to be in community with them? Relationships and community, it can feel risky. We all pick up hurts and betrayals along our way, and so strong communities are made up of people who empathize with that feeling in other people, that it's hard, it's risky. You pick up pain along the way when you show yourself and you're vulnerable. So who can you make it easier to be vulnerable for by showing that they matter to you and you are glad to be in community with them? It's hard right now when so much of life is virtual. So maybe it's more important than ever to do so. That's my challenge for us this morning. All right. Well, as we get underway for today, moderating our chat and addressing any of our questions, if we have any concerns today, is the wonderful Allison May, the real Allison May, not the Allison May who had the name Allison May underneath while they were playing guitar. I mean, that was just a complete lie. This is the real Allison May who will be moderating. Allison, hi. Do you have any specific prompts for us today? Oh no, there's the imposter. What is he doing?
It's my time. Okay. Oh, hi everyone. Yes. So, good morning. Welcome everybody. I have a question for people today because I started watching some new shows. And so my question is, what have people recently been really getting into that's maybe kind of binge-worthy or really thought-provoking? Sergio and I just started 2 shows recently. One was What We Do in the Shadows, which is like the mockumentary TV show based on the movie What We Do in the Shadows about vampires. Really loving it. And then the second is like this sci-fi thriller show from Germany on Netflix called Dark. I'm only 3. Okay, Maria likes it. That's good. Trust your opinion on those things, Maria. I'm only about like 3 episodes in, 4 episodes in. So I don't know how the whole thing's going to pan out, but I'm really into it and I'm really liking it if you like those sorts of things. So I'm curious what anybody else has to recommend because I've kind of finished everything else that I've been watching. So welcoming suggestions here in the chat. If you want to type in anything that you've been getting into, please share with all of us.
Love it. Great question. We're all gonna refresh our queues for Netflix. Yeah, we've all been doing a lot of watching lately, haven't we? That's part of this time. Thank you, Allison. So yeah, if you have any questions at all, if you want to chime in on our great question for today, drop it in the chat and Allison will take care of you. At this point, I'll also introduce once again my co-pastor, Kyle Hannawalt, as we turn toward today's discussion. Hey, Kyle.
How's it going? Yeah, I would, if you haven't watched Watchmen yet on HBO from last year, that was probably the best thing I've watched in the last year or two. So that's worth.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, we are continuing our series of discussions that we've been in, God of the Oppressed, this phrase that we have borrowed from James Cone, the writer on Black liberation theology, who we talked a good deal about last week. We are immersing ourselves in various different oppressed people group perspectives on Jesus and faith and on the Bible. And the idea here is that in America, what colors most of our understandings of Jesus and God is a powerful perspective, people who are in the dominant culture. And that has serious limitations. We've talked about, for one thing, Jesus was not a dominant culture person. He was a minority within an empire. And so if we're talking about Jesus, we've kind of got to go from the other direction to really understand what Jesus was about, the non-powerful position, not the powerful position. And then because when any of us are facing the hardest things of life, just functionally, when we're facing suffering, when we are facing loss or challenge, it is not the most powerful people we turn to for help. We turn to people who have done suffering before, who have done challenge before. And usually power just protects you from those things. So really what we need in any of us is a God who sees that, who knows what it's like to endure and overcome pain and suffering. And that is the story of Jesus. Jesus is the God who is not distant and removed from suffering, but who walked right into suffering and shared in humanity's story. And so it is oppressed people groups much more than people in power who can teach us about such a God. We are thrilled today for today's edition of this series to be joined by BLC's own Maria Santillan, and she's going to help us to understand a church outsider perspective on Jesus. Hi, Maria.
Hello.
Glad you're with us. Thank you. We're so thrilled. So Maria is as loyal and generous a person and a friend as I've ever known. She is a valuable member of BLC's financial board. And as our topic today suggests, she is a church outsider who nonetheless finds herself involved in this church pretty heavily. So Maria will be sharing about something that is close to my heart. I wanted to say before we jump in, because this is so close to my heart, the seeds of this church were really to be a spiritual space for people who feel more comfortable in progressive settings rather than religious settings. And these were first planted in me over a decade ago. And this church first began when Kyle and I started a dinner group in 2012. But I remember having an epiphany several years later and about what we were about the seeds that this church started with. And the epiphany was after Michael Brown and Eric Garner were killed in the riots, and then shortly after, I should say, the riots in Ferguson. And during that time, when I first learned about the concepts of white privilege and white fragility and why it's so important to fight for equity and address the societal structures that limit access to resources for some but not others, I was feeling so humbled, and my mind was really being expanded to when it came to my outlook on race. But the other thing that it did for me was that it brought me back to this conviction that our church started on. It helped me to understand that I think our church from the beginning has been talking about privilege and equity this entire time. And what we were talking about was religious privilege and equity in spiritual spaces. And now I had a new understanding to kind of like see, this is what we've been discussing. Because in the same way that white people can feel fatigued or fragile or defensive in conversations about race, our church has often felt tiring and triggering and too radical to longtime churchgoers, because we centralize the experience of church outsiders here, not church insiders. That's really interesting. You know, this has brought us challenges, honestly, as a church. People have left our church for this reason, but it has also been by design, because we were founded on a kind of equity work. We did not start this church to reward or reinforce religious privilege. We started this church to elevate the prospects spiritually, the possibilities spiritually for people who don't have religious privilege. And in America, if you're not a church insider, if your family or culture doesn't predispose you to be able to navigate American churches, you're at a disadvantage in terms of growing spiritually. You're at a disadvantage in terms of finding community. And this is an increasing number of us. Like the fastest, this has been true for 2 decades, the fastest growing religious identification in America. Do you know what it is? It's none. None. That's the fastest growing religious identification in America for 2 decades. Church outsiders can sometimes get lucky and find footing in a certain church, and something that they didn't grow up in, and against the odds, they grow spiritually. That is largely my story personally. But the fact is that it comes down to luck far more than anything else. And it shouldn't come down to luck. The fact that it comes down to luck shows that there are structural problems with the way churches do things. People are left out systematically. Outsiders to American church culture long for community. They long for community just like everybody else. They just don't want to be condescended to get that, or forced to convert their cultures. So I'm on my soapbox here because I'm excited. This is what Maria's going to be bringing us into, is like the reason I wanted to start this church. It's the first seed that has flowered into lots more other things. But we started this church on equity work, equity in spiritual spaces, and that has only grown. And certainly this series that we've been digging into this summer has only shown us how that has grown so much more. So Maria she has a story that is really important to us because she is one of these people. She's a representative of the first equity battle our church ever set out to fight. So Maria, now that I've set up everything, this is everything. And now you have to follow up on that. Sorry about that. I got really excited, but I'm excited for good reason because I know you'll follow through. I wanted to ask, just our first question to you as we dive in is, like, what sort of specific things are we talking about when we talk about church outsiders being marginalized in spiritual spaces or being oppressed in spiritual spaces? What do we mean there?
Yeah, thank you for the intro. I was going to say, thanks for coming to my TED Talk, and just end it there. But yeah, it comes down to what I'm processing as microaggressions that at the time you don't pick up on those things that in the moment, or I certainly don't. I take a while to process things. And one example is people in my life that have assumed religious facts or knowledge, lingo that are expected to be common knowledge. But if you aren't in the know, then you are excluded, you feel left out. So one story is when I was in high school, I was asking a question of someone, and the way that person responded was supposed to be in this like rhetorical, obviously yes question. And they said, well, is the Pope Catholic? And I looked at them with this kind of glazed look. I said, is that a no, yes, no, yes? I didn't know. Because that knowing if the Pope was Catholic was not something critical to my relationship with God at that moment. It didn't. Things like that come up, and it's assumed who the Pope is and the affiliation, or who the cardinals are, the archdiocese. It's assumed that if you're in America or you're in Western culture that you would know that, but I didn't have that. And we talked about coining this term of home church, because people are talking about homeschooling. So it seemed to fit with me. It's like, I think I was home churched. I took my parents and my grandma, they took the best things out of what they learned in religion, in their upbringing, and shared that and passed that down to me and my siblings. Things like, loving each other and loving others, tradition of, celebrating Christmas and Easter as a family meals, and, having Jesus in your heart. And that kind of perpetuated this home church thing, is that it was okay that I wasn't going to church because Jesus was in my heart. I was carrying that.
Yeah, I love that you brought us to the term microaggressions. I think that that's a really important one. That's one, as we prepped, we realized is super useful. These kind of small things that you don't really realize in the moment. They're so subtle. They are not overt examples. And we often talk about them in terms of racism and how that props up systemic racism in our society. And this is a way that it happens in spiritual spaces, that it sort of the cultural expectations or the inside jokes, right? The Christian inside jokes, the references to the Bible or to a Christian telling of history, and they come out all the time. They come out in just like random conversations with churchgoers. They come out from the pulpits, right? When people are preaching, they come out in public messages that churches release like online. And I think what's really important here is before we kind of dive into some of the perspective that Maria will bring to us here, is that we're not talking about the difference between being a person of faith or a skeptic, or between being a believer or an agnostic. We're talking about whether or not the family and culture you grew up in predisposes you to understand or be able to navigate American church settings. So this is religious privilege. You can be a skeptic or an agnostic and have a ton of religious privilege, right? Because your family, like, you grew up in it or something like that. And you can be a believer and have very little religious privilege. So we're talking about how conversations in church settings revolve around the insiders. Partly because, I mean, it's sad to say, but like that's where the money is, right? Like the church world has its own music industry, its own publishing industry, its own self-help industry, entertainment industry, right? Like, I mean, there are very few churches that organize their conversation around what outsiders need. And so that's what we're doing here as we hear from Maria. So we're going to put up a few perspectives that we've prepared for today, and we're gonna kind of throw them out there and see where Maria takes us. And Kyle and I will jump in and ask questions and kind of and look for clarity as we understand Jesus from a church outsider perspective. So let me get our stuff up on the screen here. And then Maria, if you would take us through our first point here, as you brought up home church, I like how you gave us that phrase. When you grow up home churched, you see God really is most revealed in Christmas, which is the time we mark the incarnation. God is close to humanity, not far away. And Easter, resurrection after death, overcoming, renewal after loss, that kind of thing. God really is most revealed in Christmas and Easter. And you see that when you grow up home churched. Maria, tell us more.
Yeah, those were the two big holidays that we celebrated at home, and it was centered around family. About we came together as family to eat or to celebrate those, and both of those have emotion for our family. Is these we're together. Even, well, we haven't talked about this year, but in the last, even growing up, and we've each moved out, that it's still coming together on these particular holidays, and I think perspective of how, or what was passed on to us, was valuing the family unit, valuing respect and love for others, and these particular ones also were valued by my mom's mom, my grandma, passed down eventually to us. So yeah, it was this unit of, well, okay, we weren't going to church. My mom didn't see a church that resonated with her, and she didn't want to subject us to something that didn't resonate with her. So we had smaller traditions of these holidays, or saying the Our Father prayer before bed every night, fostering those positive relationships with God. And the church that she did like is the one that my grandma went to, and is on the south side in Bridgeport, and I have respect for now, is that it's hard to get 3 young kids up and ready and dressed and travel across the city to go to church, and to one that was valued. So so we had to do it at home. So I praise my parents for doing that, because it set a good foundation. Well, at the time, I felt like I was being excluded, like, from school. A lot of my peers were going to the same Sunday school, and I felt left out of that. I felt left out of the community piece. But in looking back, I don't feel like I at all was left out of the relationship with God. So I find that to still be very powerful and set me up for where I am today.
I think that I think what's interesting about this is I think within, as somebody who grew up kind of in a strange space, because I grew up very much immersed as a son of a pastor, a third generation, pastor's family, that like I understood how to navigate kind of church culture, like the things people want to hear, all of those things. While simultaneously the rest of my life existing in a place like Evanston, Illinois, which was very distinctly in the kind of more progressive, multi-perspective, celebrating kind of non-church climate. And there was a lot of, I think, interesting experience of judgment of people that only show up for Christmas and Easter. Like they don't take it seriously. Like there's a real judgment of kind of how false that experience of faith is. And there's a lot of conversation, which you think about how culture creating it is, a lot of conversation about being a real Christian. It's like this emphasis on real Christian, those people that really do it seriously. You think about how culture shaping that is. You think about the way that communicates constant anxiety within people that are there, but also a constant sense of kind of you don't fully belong here to people that aren't already enculturated into your experience. But on the other side of it, like there's a reason Christmas and Easter are the two biggest things that are on the
That's right.
church calendar. It's because it's kind of like we're marking the God of the universe coming into humanity to be with us. And that God of the universe, through the act of his death and resurrection, bringing us in even more into his presence and offering us all of the things in life that we are looking to a God to offer us. And it makes total sense that if we are not feeling warm and welcomed into the weekly experience of a church, the enculturated experience of the church, that there's actually there's still the note of these celebrations that I think at their heart really do tap into who Jesus is, and why I think, Maria, you talk about this idea that you felt a barrier to connect to church, but you didn't feel that barrier connecting to Jesus. And I think that there is a sense of you found those traditions at home that tapped into the heart and character of who Jesus is, which not shockingly in the two biggest holidays celebrate who God is in the incarnation and resurrection.
Yeah, I was going to say, Maria, that in our preparation for this week, I remember feeling something similar that you just said, Kyle. I'm so glad you said it, where there's like this pressure often in American church settings, like you need to know the obscure things of faith. To know the obscure things of the Bible is like wow, like you must really be serious, right? Like that's the word. And you can wear those like a badge of honor. But it just struck me as I think one of the things that I've always noticed from you, Maria, just as a person, is those two things that we're marking with Christmas and Easter, that renewal can come after loss, that you can overcome, that you can be resilient in the Easter story. And then that like being close and empathizing, and like God does that with us, and we can do that with others. It's like, those are two things that you've just always exuded, Maria. And I just feel like that you have a way, like, it's shocking to think, I think it's shocking to say in a church setting that what if Maria, as a home church person, has a better foundation for connecting with Jesus than somebody who went to church their entire life?
Well, it's when you're in church that there's, it's funny, I was laughing at myself of like the obscure references. I can remember being young and in a church and somebody mentioned something and they're like, oh, the parable of the sower. And there's a sense of like, oh yeah, I know this one. Okay. Like there's a sense of, oh, I got this one. Oh, it's Genesis 4. Oh, okay. That's where we get into, and it's like, there's almost like, almost even like seeing people like turn, oh, he's about to talk about this thing, and there's like a real, almost a sense of, I kind of remove myself from engaging with what's about to happen in some ways because I'm like, oh, I get this one. And it's almost like this, I want to be in the know, opposed to really leaning into, it's not about like being in the know and being able to like quickly be like, oh, parable of the sower, I know that point, but it's about engaging with this living God. And I think that's why the what we see in Christmas and Easter, I think, is about the living God. It's not about the information collection. It's not about being able to say our tenets of faith. It's about God come to man and God come to us, drawing us into relationship with him profoundly through the act of resurrection. I think so. It makes total sense to me how, it's to be human is to want to feel like on the inside in the know. And it makes sense that in this kind of experience of church that it would be no different.
Yeah, that tugs at my heartstrings, because to my core, I love pointing out obscure things out of TV and movies and stuff like that. I live for that. I live for that, obscure things within obscure references. It's like, I love that. It's like, so this was one area where I couldn't do it. I couldn't fit into whatever box that they were talking about. And that's what you strive for. But yeah, no, I love obscure references. I get it. I get what that feels like, but couldn't get it out of here. Yeah.
What a fine lesson that's just such a human experience, right? Like, we all long to be the person who can make the obscure references in an inside group, but how difficult the challenges become when that happens in a church setting, and how initially maybe if we could find a space, like if Maria can find a space where that's not she's not systemically kind of pushed away or made to feel secondary or second class as a result of that. I mean, when you don't have that instinct with the religious muscle, I mean, your faith can just grow so much more and avoid so many pitfalls. So really a lesson for us as we think about kind of building spaces for our children even. All right, well, let's go to our second point, Maria, and I want to hear more about this. It says, when you don't grow up in the American Christian subculture, you see, of course, Jesus is about inclusion and justice. Maria, tell us more.
Yeah, somewhat in talking about the in and out and the obscure references leading into that, in just about every phase of my life so far, I've had periods where, I don't fit in, where it's school or it's ethnicity, it's some portion of it, there's me battling, trying to fit in and not meeting expectations of either others or society. And with religion, I knew I had a relationship with Jesus. I knew I had a relationship with God. And it became less about finding a church and more about finding a place that will accept me as me, the way God accepts me, and my relationship, that it's okay that I don't meet those rules. As a box checker at heart, I've always wanted to say, okay, well, it's easier to say, oh, am I Catholic? Well, no. It's like, well, am I Christian? Well, no. It's a vulnerable place for me to be in, to explain my faith, because I was baptized Catholic, but we weren't necessarily practicing. And I kind of want to say Christian, but there's a lot of negative connotations associated with Christianity. So if I do say that, I have to say, oh, wait, but not like that. I have to explain it a little bit. And, it wasn't until later where, Sergio introduced me to Brownline that I was like, oh, this feels more like where I can see, my grandma sitting there, clapping along to worship songs. It's like I can feel us there. And that I didn't have to really check the box. And it also gave me a better elevator speech for how to explain my faith to people, but that's still a vulnerable space. But yeah, it's becomes more obvious that I'm okay with the relationship that I have with Jesus, because I know he accepts me for me. And it was trying to find a space where I could still experience that in a church or community setting.
I think it's interesting. There was the study that Pew did, what was it, 5 years ago now, and asked people, like, what are the top things you associate with Christianity, particularly from people who do not affiliate themselves as Christian. And the top one was like anti-gay, judgmental, shame. It's this list of things that what the perspective of how Christianity is experienced in our culture, particularly as we see the rise of the kind of focus on the family experience during the 60s, moved into the most, like, brought together with the rise of religious right that got a lot of influence and power under George W. Bush's presidency. You see the way that this idea of inclusion and justice being at the heart of Jesus, like, it is just That's not what has created a thriving American church. What has allowed the kind of the stronghold of church influence to exist has not been known for standing on inclusion and justice. It has been standing on not losing our way of life. It's been founded on, standing up for the family and holding up, like the world's trying to take something from us. And that, I think that's a really, and to empathize with people that grew up from that place, to them, that perspective is a matter of justice. It's not like they're, when you think about, like, if you feel like the world's going a way that you're worried about, trying to hold on to it, it's like, oh, I'm worried about where that's going to go. I think trying to be generous to people that hold that perspective. But if we're thinking about this conversation in particular, and we're thinking about people that didn't grow up with an experience of understanding that culture and understanding that worldview and understanding the ways that churches exist, think about the impression of what is being communicated to you when you go into churches, and when those are the things that are most associated with it, and the conversations around when you walk into church, if that's what's coming off at you, it feels like, I don't understand how we talk about who Jesus is as loving your enemy and doing all that versus what I actually see and hear. And it becomes like like, I don't know why would I want more of that? I don't want more of that. That doesn't seem interesting to me. That's not speaking to my values, even though I think Jesus would absolutely be calling forward into like a deeper sense of humanity and care for each other. It's just the barrier of culture, and especially in our country, the barrier of politics over on top of culture, and not just general culture, but culture of people in power and influence standing there, and how that is just a massive turnoff and a massive barrier for people that don't already exist with that privilege.
I would have considered myself as a nun, I would just say, oh, I'm spiritual, because then that cuts off a lot of that conversation and that question. And, again, like I said, it's a vulnerable space to kind of explain, my faith. It's very, it's personal for me. And I guess we'll get into that in the next point. It was like, but it's not something I share generally. And, but yeah, I would, I want to be able to click a box, because it's easier conversation, I guess. But yeah, I would either put none or or spiritual. I think that's more common now, is to say something like that. It's like you're spiritual, is like, because that's easier to explain to people, and it doesn't come with as many questions as as another, or drilling questions like, oh, you're Catholic, oh well. And then I could just imagine the conversation of, do you know these things, or do you know how a mass the order of mass goes, and things that you should be in the know about. It's like, so I'll just stick to none or spiritual, just kind of avoid the qualifying questions that to verify whether or not you do fit in that box.
Yeah, I like that, Maria. And I also think about an early interaction between you and me when after we had asked you to be a part of the financial board on Brownline, and you've been a faithful member for a number of years now. And I remember we were discussing something that had to do with just the heritage of churches in America being exclusive. And I think one of the joys about your response is that you were just like, wait, hold on, this is a thing. And like I saw you like show, you're not super overt, but I remember your face was like, wait, what, like this exclusion is a thing? Like there are churches that believe that like women shouldn't preach, and that gay people are not welcome, and all of these things. I just remember exclusion being like shocking to you, because what you had experienced at this point by finding a community that you did feel at home in Brownline was like, gee, this is obvious. Like, what if we're talking about like God, and we're talking about like, first off, I'm not going to follow God unless that's like an obviously a good thing, and like, isn't despair the enemy? Like, isn't like violence and poverty and racism the enemy? Like, other religions, like people who have different lifestyles than you, secularism, like those aren't the enemy. What? And I just remember like seeing that like visible shocked look on your face and thinking like, yes, this is why Maria's perspective matters so much, because even, you know, like even those of us who kind of like have, for those in our community, like who actually feel viscerally like against the idea that Jesus could be about exclusion. And, you know, and maybe you know that from like a lot of church going history in your life. I think like that is still an example of you coming to very good conclusions out of religious privilege. And there's something really important that, you know, like that people who are outsiders to this really bring, which is that visible shocked look. Because if you have the privilege and you've come to that conclusion, you actually like, you're not shocked. You're like, yep, it's working like it's supposed to. That's what happens in churches. But we need to maintain this experience that we always need to maintain this experience of being like, this is not okay. This is not what Jesus is actually about. And I think, Maria, you carry that just with the way you operate, because you don't come with all of that religious background.
Yeah, I think in the series that we've talked about it so far, it's, you know, every conversation has had, you know, that thought come up of, well, Jesus himself was marginalized, and it doesn't make sense for him to exclude others if he's living through that too. He's advocate for the marginalized, and I think that's how I grew up. My parents were echoing that, is that we should be loving and supportive of others, and that was just. So I probably gave that Chrissy Teigen face of like, what is this? That shocked face. It's like, what's going on? What? But yeah, because I didn't know, and that's I think what helps me in my relationship with God is that I don't know some of those boundaries. I don't know some of those rules. So in this way, it helped in a good way of that I didn't have to feel, you know, like I was going against the rules, because we were kind of making up our own rules, or just knowing that God was loving, or Jesus was about love and support for others. That, yeah, when I do hear about that, it is still shocking that exclusion plays any part in a relationship with Jesus. Yeah.
Well, and when we talk about privilege, who are the people that Jesus most directly called out for the ways that they were inhibiting people from living life well? It was the religious privilege. It was calling them out as putting burdens on people that they themselves couldn't carry, talking about creating barriers for people, focusing on the wrong things, you know, like this, all of the accusations that were most direct from Jesus, his deepest and most kind of direct rebukes, were for those with religious privilege. And, you know, that's like a thing about when I don't think it's shocking when people are like, what would Jesus rebuke if he came back again today? I was like, I think it would be the exact same thing. I don't think it would be that different. I think he would be rebuking those who use power and privilege, and most acutely those who are doing it in his name.
Religious, yes.
Yeah, the religious are using to do that, and he would be rebuking them because they are actually inhibiting what he's trying to do in the world and not supporting it, even though they're technically doing it themselves in his name, which I think is an important piece for us to think about of what Jesus himself was telling us to pay attention to. And religious privilege was at the heart of much of it.
All right. Well, we have one more point we want to hear. And so, Maria, tell us about when faith has never had to be about conforming. You see, God speaks using the unique furniture of your mind. Tell us more, Maria.
Yes. It's a combination of the not conforming, because I didn't know what to conform to, but then striving to click a box. So it's a little bit of conflict there. But what I did know about other people's experiences of how they came into religion, or were stories from people over time, or from TV and movies. And it's usually something like, they hear an audible voice or a booming voice. They have this spectacular, detailed vision, and they have this grand experience that leads them towards God, or towards spirituality. And in hearing those, I could just remember thinking, I was like, why not me? And why didn't these things happen to me? And so I started thinking about, this is relatively recently where I started thinking about, well, where did my faith come from? How did I get to brown light? And I started going back and realized that I found it through grief. So I've talked about a little bit about my grandma. I know she loved her some God. And I knew about the angels, about Gabriel, about Michael. So what I do know is like it's from her. I could feel that. And when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was really hard for our family. And a few years later, when she passed on, it was devastating for us. That I found myself back in my dorm room after the service, and just like an old school mercury thermometer, just filling with this anger and hate for God, because I was like, I prayed, you're supposed to heal her. She was your number one fan. Why did this happen? And it was just all of that energy filling, and also feeling guilt, like, oh, did I pray wrong? Am I doing this wrong? Am I not doing enough? Am I not, because I didn't go to church to pray for her. Is that something that affected it? And I just remember feeling like it was filling me up. And before I get caught in actual drowning of it, I felt a really warm feeling on my back, and a thought that popped into my head that grandma was okay. She wasn't sick, and that Jesus was with her the whole time. And it was such a relief that in a physical way, felt like a lot of that anger was pushed away and replaced. And a thought of my grandma like handing me her Bible, almost, of like handing me her faith. And since then it was like, oh, this is real. This is how God speaks to me, is through, thoughts in my head. I didn't have a vision of her. I didn't hear her or God talk to me in that moment. And it's because God knows me better than I know myself. And as much as I say I want to hear the booming voice or the vision, God knows that I would freak out if either of those things happen. It's like, that's not how I operate. I'm an internal person, predominantly introvert. I am always living in my head. I'm questioning my own thoughts all the time. So it kind of makes sense that he would use the furniture of my mind, would use what makes sense to me. How he can get to me is through thoughts in my head and working through others. So that's what I feel like my origin story of faith comes from, is actually, oddly enough, through grief, and through passing that through my grandma. So again, it was a long period of time after that where I wasn't really looking for a church, not really trying to, because I felt like, no, this is okay where this is right now, and I just have to find a home that accepts that where I am in that journey. So, and that's where, Sergio found you guys, or he invited me to come be with you guys. So that's my story.
Thank you so much, Maria, for sharing that. I think it's just a powerful picture of God meeting you. And I think for me, it was always like a sense of, I get to see God more when I hear about how other people encountered him. And I think what you talked about is at the heart of kind of why we felt this church needed to exist in a world where there's a million other churches. And you can think about how church culture is even just reinforced by the fact that even a slight shift in perspective often means that we're going and creating our own kind of new community where we can all just, be even more on the same page. And so why did we need to exist? And I think it's because I think Vince and I both knew tons and tons of people that were absolutely looking for experiences of Jesus, and because of culture, we're just not finding them in the churches that they were going to. And it was because those churches weren't trying to speak to them. They were trying to speak to those who already had the religious privilege and would benevolently offer to enculturate you into the status quo of this church. So if you would like to, I can convert you into this experience, and then you too can experience this religious privilege. And that just, for myself, I didn't enjoy that. And for so many people we knew, I was that there was a sense of a desire for community, a desire for spiritual growth, a desire for connection with God. And there were just too many barriers that weren't actually about any of those things, because we live in a world where the cultural trajectory of church and the trajectory of our wider culture have been going in opposite directions, particularly in places like Chicago. There's some places where those align more closely, but just if you are a person who grew up going to church, the enculturation process in an evangelical American church versus the enculturation process of a American not going to church it's gotten wider and wider and wider by the day. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I don't think it's evil. I don't think the world has gone to hell. I think that there's actually a lot of ways that I think our wider culture has gone a better direction and our church culture has gone a worse direction. But the truth is they're just really far apart. And if we don't acknowledge that, we're just going to keep on rewarding those that go into church and get those jokes and go into church and are asking the same questions that everyone else in their experience are asking, rather than inviting people to encounter God in the way that their own mind and life is trying to encounter God. I just really appreciate you sharing that, Maria.
Yeah, Maria, I've shared pretty openly here in church as well that my own story began with grief, and so just to me, I think that our stories both are propped up by the fact that we didn't have some sort of like religious cultural experience telling us that in order to find God when that terrible thing happened, it has to look like X, Y, or Z. I mean, I guess we all have journeys, like you're saying, like we get it from like television, about like what it looks like to hear from God. But when you don't have all of that background of like the family and the culture you grew up in, like hoisting all of this theology on you, or hoisting all of this, like, you have to understand that horrible thing that happened to you this way. I mean, there is a lot of pressure, and I just can't help but once again think like your background, and I would throw myself into this too, had us better suited to find God in the midst of a tragic experience than somebody who would have grown up going to church in America. And that deeply saddens me. Like, shouldn't growing up in church lead you to more readily find Jesus in the midst of a terrible circumstance? It shouldn't make it harder. And so I just think your perspective once again gives me eyes to see what really matters. Like, what is it important for us to actually be bringing people into, to find God in the midst of grief? That's what we should help people find. Like, that's a worthy thing for our discussion, and everything else is just secondary, right? And so again, you sharing so vulnerably about that experience and just like how it felt, and it was heat on your back, and it's just like, yes, this is the stuff of God. This is why we get together. Well, let me bring it, because we're going over on time. Who would have thunk it? Vince's favorite topic, and we go over on time. But I do want to bring in Allison a little bit here and just see, is there anything happening in the chat that would be worth kind of throwing in and posing to Maria, or just kind of letting us stir the pot a little bit, Allison?
Yeah, sure. Well, Maria, I want to let you know that a lot of people were commenting in the chat about how powerful that story was and how much they just appreciated you sharing it. And so thank you for sharing that. And a few people also commented how they really resonate with that term, labeling themselves as spiritual, and feeling like that's the most accurate and the description that they're the most comfortable with. So just scrolling through here, it really just looks like a lot of what you said people resonated with, and they were like, yep, that makes sense, and that makes sense, and I identify with that. So yeah, it was really just spot on for our group today, I think. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. And it's nice to hear that too, because, a lot of this, I felt like I was alone in it too. When you're out, when you don't have that background. A lot of this feels, isolating or lonely, that you're not part of that community, or that your experience isn't valid in some way. So no, I appreciate that. Thanks, everyone.
Well, this has been awesome. I want to pray for us and let us kind of marinate in that way a little bit. Maybe we can feel some of the same kind of things we're hearing about as we describe spiritual experience, of just that peace, that heat on our back. It can look different for each of us because it's the furniture of our own minds. So let me pray a little bit and take us into that space. Pray with me. Well, God, we're so grateful for Brownline and for the stories that have made up this church. I feel so grateful right now. I feel so grateful for Maria's story and the way that she has experienced you and the way that we have gotten to benefit from that as she has connected with us and been a stakeholder here in our community. And for all of the stories that her story represents, as in this series, we are trying to represent perspectives that are not often heard. And this one particularly is not often heard in church settings. It is made second class. It's made, to be something that, well, that's great. But, once you convert and become serious, then you can really speak to us. And this is it just feels like in so many ways, I see Jesus in what Maria is talking about more so than in any church conversation. And I just thank you for that. And I thank you for all the people who have come through our church that have shown us that, the people who have been with us for a while and they've moved away. And we pray that in some way they would feel, as we're praying right now, that they would feel kind of undergirded in their own spirituality. Like if they're not here on the call right now because they were with us years ago, that they would feel blessed this morning. But we pray all of us here in this community that are trying to make this a safe space, that are trying to make this a place that tears down the systemic ways that church outsiders are marginalized in churches. We pray that you teach us what's the next step in that. And as we have so powerfully, especially this summer, just kind of connected that to equity work and all of the other things that we're talking about right now, being a part of what you're doing in the world, God. You are for equity, and we want you to be for equity in this way, in this church. Help us to do that well. Help us to honor every story that we encounter. Help us to honor all of those people who are more comfortable to classify themselves as spiritual than as Christian. Who cares? Jesus, you welcome them all. You are so inclusive, and we receive that. And I pray that you would help us even today feel charged as a community with that at its core, that mission at its core. Help us to feel excited and proud to be here. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, Maria, wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing so openly from your story and then for helping us to think deep thoughts too. You're wonderful. Thank you for that. And we want you all to stay tuned because we have 2 more talks in our God of the Oppressed series. We're very excited for next week. Haley Larson will be helping us look at a feminist theology. Super pumped about this. This is something that Haley has also done a fair amount of formal study of too. So we're excited that she'll be lending us her knowledge and her experience to do that next week. And then we will end on August 23rd. I'll get to share my story, my part 2 of what Kyle kicked us off with which is decentralizing God that is understood through the lens of power. All right. Some quick announcements here as we finish up our time together. We will drop in the chat our Sunday check-in link. As we've been saying, this is a quick way to help us know how you're doing. If you have a prayer request, if there's a need that you have that the church can help meet. If you want to get coffee with one of us, one of the pastors, we would love to do that. So follow up with the check-in and we'll connect with you. That way it only takes 1 minute to follow the link and just fill out the yes or no questionnaire. If you are newer with us or you're not sure that we have your contact info, you're Zooming in or you're Facebook Living in and you're just curious because you know a friend here or something like that, we would love to connect with you that way. So fill out our online Connect card. It's brownlinechurch.org/connect, and we'd love to follow up with you and get to know you better, even though we can't see you in person right now. The best ways to stay connected right now during virtual church, which is our reality for the foreseeable future, it is our YouTube channel, which has all of our old services, starting with the ones this summer. And we'll continue to update that. We're grateful to Mike Frazier, who keeps that updated. Thanks, Mike. And you can follow up on previous services that way. You can watch the whole thing, the prayers and all of that. We have our podcast, which continues to host just the discussion parts of our of our services. And we're on a little hiatus for vacation's sake from our midweek podcast, but we'll get going with that again in a week. So the podcast is a great way to stay connected. And then, of course, our email newsletter. If you don't see those, check your promotions tab in Gmail. It is a helpful way when we are not able actually to all see each other on Sundays to get information. And you can follow us on social via Instagram or Facebook. If you are in financial need due to COVID-19, the church can help bridge a gap. You can fill out our Time of Need Fund request form. It's totally confidential. Only the pastors will see it, and we'd love to help you if that's a situation right now. We'll also throw a financial update here on the screen. We are a crowd-funded church, and so everything we've ever been able to do has been through people who call this church home, giving out of their own monthly income. Monthly gifts are the vast majority of how we operate. We are doing okay right now financially in terms of the costs of what it takes to run our community, and most of that is due to the fact that we do not have to pay rent right now. Our hosts at the Davis Theater are super generous to us, and they're not requiring that of us right now. So. But if you would be so generous to invest that way, we'd love monthly gifts. I mean, it really helps us to plan when we know what to expect every month, and eventually our costs will go up again. And so it's important for us to kind of be on top of things as we're kind of flying through this COVID-19 world like everybody else. Quick announcements. One, I just saw something in the chat earlier that maybe I'll highlight. That was Laura and Lester are going to an event that's later today. That is a group of United Wards that are calling for police accountability committee. And I don't know if Laura and Lester are still on. I'm not going to look through, but Laura and Lester, do you guys have any more information if you're still here on Zoom?
Sorry, I was like walking away.
Sorry about that. I put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think Lester was telling me about this protest, and if people are interested in abolition in general, this is a way to rally and protest to get CPAC in place. So if you don't know what CPAC is, I think that link kind of helps like you go to like the website and learn more about it. But it's just a community-based, I would say like accountability to police. And I mean, the ultimate goal is, to defund and to establish a community base of being accountable to things that are happening instead of the police solving that for the community. So yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing at 2, and there's 2 locations, and we're going to the one that's more west. There's like there's one on the east side, yeah, and then there's one towards the west, and that's the one we're doing. So.
Very good. Cool. Well, thank you for dropping that in, and thanks for letting me put you guys on the spot. I saw it earlier, and I wanted to make sure that we amplified it as much as possible. So if people joined the service later, they still saw it. If you want to just drop that info in the chat again, just so we can see it, and that link that you were talking about. And if anybody wants to connect, and look at that, Allison already did it. Thank you, Allison, for being on top of that. Cool. All right. Well, in terms of what to look ahead, we as we close up our God of the Oppressed series in a couple of weeks, we do want everybody to just be aware we're going to be turning to a series of that is asking what's next for our church. And we kind of, this time where we've been in virtual church has not been a time where lots of newcomers have discovered us, sort of understandably, right? Like we're virtual right now. But what it has been is a time to get introspective. And so we've really been thinking about reorganization and sort of reassessing and reexamining what it is we're truly about. Honestly, we started that before COVID was a thing as a church, as we began this year, 2020, talking about how we could be more explicit about our value on LGBTQ inclusion. And so we've been in a reexamining, reassessing space already, and we want to take advantage of that. So that's what's going to be up next. And we really want to encourage you to bring your whole selves to our virtual services starting in the fall here as we talk more about like what's next for our community. This is the time to be introspective while we're in this space. All right, Kyle, would you please lead us in some virtual communion as we come to a close here?
Absolutely. Thank you again, Maria. All over the world and all throughout history, people have used all sorts of foods and drinks to symbolize Jesus's body broken and his blood shed. So feel free to go grab whatever you'd like, some liquid, some food, if you want to participate. But we use this as a weekly chance for us to take a moment, take a breath together, and just acknowledge we need help in life that we can't give ourselves. Looking to Jesus to offer that help to us, to find healing, hope, grace, challenge, growth, guidance. And we look to the bread symbolizing his body broken and the cup symbolizing his blood shed, because we recognize that Jesus has walked through all of the hardest things of life, that Jesus has experienced betrayal, and in walking into death, he was raised on the third day and offering new life to us as well. And so we look to these two things as almost as our bodies are being fed, symbolizing Jesus meeting our needs. We do this together because we recognize that we don't do any of life alone. And actually any picture of who we see Jesus is just being represented by our own lens or those like us is very, very, very inaccurate and small picture of who he is, and that we need to see each other and hear each other's stories to be able to actually see a fuller version of who God is. And so on the night that Jesus was betrayed, he broke bread, gave thanks, and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Whenever you do this, do so in remembrance of me." Likewise, he took the cup and said, "This is my blood shed for you. Whenever you do this, do so in remembrance of me." And we do that today, Jesus. We do that by taking a breath and asking you to be close to us. We take a breath and acknowledge that we need help, acknowledge that we have needs that we can't just meet ourselves. And we ask for you to meet us in that, meet us directly, and meet us through the people around us. Amen.
All this pain, I wonder if I'll ever find my way. I wonder if my life could really change at all. All this earth, could all that is lost ever be found? Garden come up from this ground at all? You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of us. All around, hope is springing up from this old ground. Out of chaos, life is being found. Out of the dust, you make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of us. You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of the dust. make me new. You are making me new. You make me new. You are making me new. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. Yeah, you make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. So you make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. You make me new. You are making me new. You make me new. You are making me new.
Jesus, we ask that you'd be with us this week. We ask that you would bring us rest where we need rest, hope where we need hope, healing where we need healing, and company where we need company. I pray that you would open our eyes to see where you're moving around us. Pray that in your name. Amen.
Great to be with you all today. Special thanks to Aaron Loescher for running our visuals today. Thank you, Aaron. For Allison for being our faithful moderator, the real Allison May. For the fake Allison May, Sergio Santillan, for being our music and worship leader. Thank you for that. And of course, to Maria Santillan for sharing today for us. Thank you so much, Maria. We will see you all next week. If you are sticking around for breakouts, give us a minute to get everyone sorted. And if anyone's joining over from Facebook, to get back over here. I believe I have everybody for the list for the equity group that is meeting after service right now. Otherwise, if you want to be in one of if you want to be in the pastoral check-in, just let me know in chat, in a private chat, and I'll put you in the right space. See you soon.